Hello and welcome to the news. To present, my name is Jeffrey Siambo. Top stories in the news. Higher Education Minister Nkanduluo says no employment contracts have been terminated at Kwame Nkrumah University in Kabwe. Vice President Inonge Wina says government through the Food Reserve Agency owes transporters 172 million kwacha. World Vision Zambia says 82% of all sexually related gender-based violence cases are perpetrated against children. The news in detail. An audit instituted at Kwame Nkrumah University in Kabwe has revealed glaring financial irregularities and lack of accountability at the institution. Higher Education Minister Professor Nkanduluo has told Parliament that some of the glaring audits at the institution include unretired imprest amounting to 968,856 kwacha for 2016 and 941,622 for 2017. She says other irregularities include the payment of subsistence allowances amounting to days in excess of 365 days in one calendar year, and up to 511 days in one instance and 735 days in one calendar year.
If the staff, and I did talk about audit for 2016 and 2017, when that institution was transitioning into a university. And let me also correct one perception, Mr. Speaker, that in fact, Mulungushi University and Kwame Nkrumah were not declared universities at the same time. And let me also inform him, in case he's not aware, that Mulungushi University did go through a transition. In fact, Professor Chinene of the University of Zambia was transferred from University of Zambia that oversaw the transition of Mulungushi University to go and be the caretaker vice chancellor for Mulungushi University, specifically to do what we are doing. So this is not peculiar to Nkrumah University. Everywhere in the world, when a new university is being established, especially from a college to a university, there is always a transition.
Professor Luo adds that other irregularities include fuel allowances being paid above the approved rate by kilometer, questionable retirements of imprest, including counterfeit receipts, failure to account for stores, equipment, and machinery amounting to over 1 million kwacha. She says the Ministries of General Education and Higher Education are working closely to ensure that those cited for resource mismanagement and failure to adhere to financial regulations are disciplined. And Professor Luo says no contracts have been terminated at Kwame Nkrumah University and that no jobs have been lost. She, however, says that the Ministry of Higher Education has commenced the process of recruiting staff and that all members of staff currently serving at the university with the requisite qualifications are free to apply for the advertised positions. Professor Luo says should any of them be selected, they will be offered contracts under the Kwame Nkrumah University Council. She adds that the Teaching Service Commission will address the issues relating to separation packages for those that will decide to migrate to the university, while those that do not have the requisite qualifications will be redeployed to other colleges.
To address these challenges, the government through the Ministry of Higher Education communicated to the University Management its intention to put in place its own establishment of academic and other staff, as the current staff complement are still under the Ministry of General Education and are employed by the Teaching Service Commission. Further, some members of staff do not have the minimum qualifications to teach in a university, although they have qualifications to teach in a college, which in Kwame Nkrumah previously was. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, a letter was sent to the university on 6 February 2018, 3 days before the lecturers decided to go on strike, instructing them to advertise all the positions in the institution and recruit competent and qualified staff to facilitate effective service delivery. In light of the above catalogue of events, it was decided to keep the institution closed until all the positions were filled under the Ministry of Higher Education.
Vice President Inonge Wina says government through the Food Reserve Agency, FRA, owes transporters 172 million kwacha. Responding to a question in Parliament from Mbala Member of Parliament Mwalimu Simfukwe during the Vice President's question time, Ms. Wina said the government has prioritized the dismantling of arrears as reflected in the 2018 national budget. She says transporters are a key stakeholder in the agricultural sector and indeed in the food supply chain, thus the need to address the challenges they are facing.
And the transporters are a very critical stakeholder in the farming industry and in the agricultural value chain. I do know that government through FRA is owing 172 million kwacha to the transporters. And that's why in the budget of 2018, dismantling of arrears, including payment to transporters, has been put in the 2018 budget for the various sectors, especially in the agricultural sector. So this is work in progress, and the farmers in Mbala and other parts of Zambia should be assured by honorable members of parliament that government will honor its obligation.
And the Vice President says it is unfortunate that the opposition always cries foul and accuses the government of transferring civil servants on the basis that they are perceived to be anti-PF. Ms. Wina says the transfers are made in accordance with the needs of service and that those who are transferred are not transferred on the basis of being supporters of the opposition, but that they are taken to areas where their services are needed the most.
All I know is that civil servants are transferred according to the criteria in the government service. And when civil servants are transferred, there's nowhere in their transfer letters where it says you are transferred because you come from this province, or you come from this tribe, or you come from this political party. And for all I know, civil servants do not belong to political parties. How then can we determine whether a civil servant at Nkrumah or in the correctional service is a member of a political party? So perhaps the honorable member has cartels in the schools, in the civil service that he knows of, and he has a list of his membership in the civil service that he thinks are being victimized, because as far as I know, the public service does not transfer civil servants due to where they come from.
Meanwhile, Ms. Wina has described the e-voucher system for the 2017-2018 farming season as a success. She says this is considering that it is the first time government has fully implemented the Farmer Input Support Program using the e-voucher. Ms. Wina says over 700,000 out of the 1 million farmers targeted by government had been reached using the e-voucher. World Vision Zambia says over 65,000 survivors of gender-based violence have accessed post-GBV care services countrywide since 2013. Speaking at the launch of the Every Hour Matter campaign organization, Chief of Party GBV Survivor Support Annie Banda says 10% of those who have received post-GBV care services are sexually abused. She explains that 82% of all the sexually related GBV cases were perpetrated against children. Details in this report.
Gender-based violence is a term used to describe any harmful act that is perpetrated against a person's will, and that is based on socially ascribed differences between male and female. Each and every individual is unique, and therefore GBV victims react differently to various social activities after their traumatic encounters. World Vision Zambia has launched a Every Hour Matters campaign to enable GBV victims report cases, especially those of sexual nature, in good time. Over 65,000 survivors of gender-based violence GBV have accessed post-GBV care services since 2013.
The project data actually from 2013, when we started working with one-stop centers to date, over 65,000 survivors of gender-based violence have accessed post-GBV care services. 10% of these are sexually abused. Okay? And then 82% of all sexual GBV cases reported at the centers were perpetrated against children. So most survivors of sexual GBV are children, according to the project data that we have. What that means actually is that a lot is not being reported because a child depends on another person to report on their behalf. And you and I know that issues of sexual violence are not talked about in our communities. So the problem is so big, and unfortunately, most of them that will report sexual gender-based violence are children.
And Ministry of Health Permanent Secretary for Administration and Technical Services, Dr. Jabin Mulwanda, has urged all stakeholders and families to provide care and support to GBV survivors. He has since backed the establishment of one-stop centers in health facilities to provide health, legal, and emotional support to GBV survivors.
You may also be interested to know that gender-based violence negatively and in a very significant way affects all aspects of women's health: physical health, sexual health, reproductive health, emotional and mental health. We also know that the higher the level of violence, the greater the impact on the victims or survivors of that violence. And exposure to more than one kind of violence results in more severe consequences. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a problem. You also know that gender-based violence is a key driver of HIV transmission. It is also a barrier to positive health outcomes. It is a problem. Survivors of gender-based violence therefore require our support.
Matters of gender-based violence involve advocacy for messages to sink in the deepest areas of society. The World Vision has therefore involved these musicians and actresses as ambassadors to spearhead messages against gender-based violence.
For me to finally find a platform where I can specifically contribute to ending sexual violence and using such a great intervention such as the post-exposure prophylaxis and the emergence contraception.
Thank you to World Vision for this initiative that was put together. Having sexual violence in Africa, being in Zambia, at such a high rate, it's a topic that is usually not tackled with efficiency.
There's so many times that I think each of us, in discussing with them, have been asked to do some work. Please be an ambassador for this, please be an ambassador for that. One thing that really drew me to this specific campaign is that they were not just asking me, please go on TV and just talk about this campaign, go on radio and just be a face. They were asking us to really take our time and do our part in making sure that the message is heard.
The campaign, which has been launched today, aims at sensitizing members of the public on measures ought to be taken whenever they are faced with GBV. Alfred Mwansa reporting for QTV News in Lusaka.
Patriots for Economic Progress PEP President Sean Tembo has called upon government to consider revising Section 13 of the National Health Insurance Bill so that membership and contribution to the proposed National Health Insurance Scheme should be made optional rather than mandatory. He says this is because Section 13 of the draft bill makes it mandatory for every Zambian of full legal capacity to belong to and contribute to the proposed National Health Insurance Scheme. Mr. Tembo explains that similarly, Section 15 of the bill makes it compulsory for all employees and employers to contribute to the proposed National Health Insurance Scheme. He says Zambian people are currently already overtaxed, and this proposed mandatory contribution to the National Health Insurance Scheme is a form of tax to the citizens which the majority of impoverished citizens can ill afford. Mr. Tembo has told Q News that a good number of citizens, especially in the urban areas, already belong to private health schemes, adding that it will be unreasonable for government to compel people to quit belonging to these private health schemes and instead join the proposed government-run National Health Insurance Scheme.
So the question then is, where would the citizens of this republic be able to get the money to be able to make these monthly contributions to the National Health Insurance Scheme? An average citizen today struggles just to buy a bag of minimum, let alone buy relish or even pay rent. And in the midst of that struggle, where would someone get the additional money needed to pay the monthly contribution to the National Health Insurance Scheme? If you look at it at the end of the day, this scheme is pretty much a tax on the citizens of the Republic. So government is indirectly introducing an additional tax to the citizens of this Republic. And the challenge with this particular tax is that it is not based on the income of the individual, but is rather applied arbitrarily across the board. And in our view, this particular proposal, which is contained in the National Health Insurance bill, is not progressive to this country. It basically fails to pass the common sense test.
The Southern African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, SACOD, is disappointed that Justice Minister Given Lubinda has ruled out the presentation of the Access to Information Bill and the Public Order Act in Parliament for enactment and amendment respectively during the current sitting. SACOD Executive Director Boniface Chembe says the Public Order Act in its current form is one of the controversial pieces of legislation and a source of conflict. Mr. Chembe says SACOD is taken aback by the government's decision not to table the act for amendment after an earlier solid assurance that it will be tabled before the House. He adds that the decision by government does not give any assurances that the act will be tabled in the next sitting of Parliament.
Yeah, well, as SACOD, we have got a number of expectations as Parliament resumes tomorrow. Clearly, one of the biggest sources of conflict, tension, and divisions in the Republic of Zambia has been the Public Order Act, a piece of legislation responsible for the regulation of freedoms of expression, association, and assembly. We welcome and wholly support the Ministry of Justice position that they will table this piece of legislation in terms of its amendments and the reforms in the next sitting of Parliament, which will start tomorrow. So as SACOD, we eagerly await and have very high expectations that perhaps for once we shall see serious political will towards the reform of this piece of legislation, which has brought about a lot of injury in our country in as far as its administration is concerned. We also believe that once the Public Order Act is attended to, it will go a long way in helping improve the nation's human rights record, owing to the fact that different stakeholders have actually seen the Public Order Act to be one of the serious sources of human rights violations in the country. Yeah. Well,
Policy Monitoring and Research Center PMRC Head of Research and Analysis Salim Kaunda says the center expects all bills that have the potential to accelerate the implementation of the 7th National Development Plan to be tabled in Parliament during the current sitting. Mr. Kaunda has cited bills such as the Public Finance Access to Information as well as the National Planning and Budgeting as some of the bills which the center wants Parliament to table. He has singled out the Public Financial Bill as one important bill which should be treated as a matter of urgency because it will help address the abuse of public funds in government. Mr. Kaunda believes that once the Public Finance Bill is enacted into law, it will be easy to wholly apply punitive measures on erring public officers. He says this is the more reason that the Policy Monitoring and Research Center has for a long time been calling for the enactment of the Public Financial Bill.
So the National Planning and Budgeting Bill as well. I think this time around we're looking at operationalizing of the legislation itself. I think that is also going to Parliament this time around. More so importantly, decentralization reforms as well in terms of legislation, because we conducted a survey late last year to understand the implementation of decentralization, because it has a critical bearing on the implementation of the 7 NDP. And we feel that at this sitting of Parliament, through the committees as well, we also appeared before the committees to actually give our views on what it is that we really need to do to speed up centralization. And I think also that's one of the critical things that our Parliament will be looking at. I think more so importantly, it is about various reforms, various bills that all speak towards aiding the implementation of the 7 NDP.
People's Alliance for Change President Andifo Dibanda has implored government to help small businesses in the country access loans from commercial banks. Mr. Banda is calling on Finance Minister Margaret Manakatwe to use her vast experience in the banking sector to ensure that small businesses are helped to grow and in turn grow the economy. Mr. Banda says small and medium enterprises, SMEs, are key stimulants of the economy. He says there is need to help them become attractive to access credit from banks in a manner that would make it difficult for them to default on loan repayments. Mr. Banda has further urged Ms. Manakatwe to work closely with ministries such as the Ministry of Commerce to structure programs for various small businesses, which would include imparting special commercial skills and arranging various business opportunities from government and private sector through Memoranda of Understandings, MOU. He adds that the Citizens Economic Empowerment Commission, CEEC, should be the driver of the process of structuring businesses.
I'd like to urge the newly appointed Minister of Finance, Margaret Manakatwe, to use her vast banking experience, and see how she, in working collaboration with the Minister of Commerce, can help small businesses access loans from banks. I think what is important is that small businesses need to be structured in a way that they attract various financial institutions to offer them some form of lending, like a loan. What the most disadvantage that most small businesses have in this country is that they're not properly structured. So it is very risky for any bank, to give money to a business that is not structured. So we believe that the Minister of Commerce and Minister of Finance can work hand in hand using Honorable Manakatwe's banking experience to structure the businesses so that they can be helped to access loans. But these loans must not just be blanket loans. They must also help them to get opportunities in the government, parastatals, and private sector. I'd like to
Governance activist David Kapoma has expressed shock over the refusal by the Registrar of Societies to register a new political party, the Zambian Democrats Party, on the assumption that it is linked to former Foreign Affairs Minister Harry Kalava. Mr. Kapoma tells QTV News that it is worrying that the Registrar of Societies is being used to hinder individuals from exercising their democratic right to form a new political party. He says even if the Zambian Democrats Party is for the Bahati Member of Parliament, the government should allow him to exercise his democratic right to form a party. Mr. Kapoma states that preventing the formation of the new political party is an infringement of their democratic right.
Well, I understand that there is a political party that apparently has been stopped from registration. And to my surprise, I do believe that every citizen of this country has the right to register a political party or any other club for that matter. And it's not up to government to stop the registration of any club, any society, any group whatsoever that citizens feel that they want to register. But if, as a government, you want to start to step on people's rights and stop them from participating and exercising their democratic right, then it is something that is quite unfortunate. Whether this named political party is aligned to Honorable Member of Parliament for Bahati constituency, Harry Kalava, or not, the bottom line is that if those people meet the criteria as stated in the Constitution and by law, then they have the right to register their political party. So it's extremely important that government, in the interest of preserving our democracy, allows every member of this country, every citizen of this country, to be able to exercise their democratic right and do as they wish. Well,
To end the news, we take a look at headlines. Higher Education Minister Nkanduluo says no employment contracts have been terminated at Kwame Nkrumah University in Kabwe. Vice President Inongo Wina says government, through the Food Reserve Agency, owes transporters 172 million kwacha. And World Vision Zambia says 82% of all sexually related gender-based violence cases are perpetrated against children. That's all we had in our news. For more news, you can visit our website, qfmzambia.com. My name is Jeffrey Ziambo.